What's going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of Move Better Mondays, filmed on Sundays, and today we are talking about the side plank. Now, this is very much a continuation off of what we discussed last week, which was essentially the front plank and how to make it a lot more challenging. I know I said front plank, but plank is pretty much the same thing. So, the plank itself is a great exercise, and just like the plank, the side plank as well is also a very good exercise. You just need to be able to build on it, and today I want to go over a couple of ways to do that. Now, the plank has been around for centuries. Okay, it may not have been around for centuries, but I know it's been around for a very long time. And just like the front plank, it has gotten a lot of negative press in recent years because it has been considered an exercise that is very basic in nature and doesn't really have anywhere to grow. And it's a very tough exercise for you to really gain all that much more out of it, especially after you've kind of mastered the initial phases. So today I want to help you guys understand how to take your side plank from a very basic exercise to a very complicated exercise and a very complex exercise, and how to get as much as you possibly can out of that simple exercise. So basically, let's just get into that. But before that, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we understand how to plank properly. This is an exercise that I've recently spoke about. I say recently, I think I actually mean about 3 months ago. Anyway, so recently, or 3 months ago, I spoke about how to do a plank properly. And essentially, it's a little tweak on a very well-known technique basis. And the little adjustment that we make is actually going to speak volumes about that exercise. And all I'm basically doing is keeping that same basic side plank position. The only thing I'm doing is I'm actually staggering my legs. And I'll show you guys what that looks like in a couple of seconds. But before that, I wanted to discuss why I'm doing it. Now, there isn't much of an entire technique change. It's a small adjustment that's gonna allow me to take a lot more advantage of my ability to use my hips to keep myself in that nice, flat, straight line position, so that my core, basically obliques and TVA and all that stuff, can actually fire properly to keep me in that stable position. So let's basically get into this. I'm gonna slide this camera back to be able to give you guys a better angle of what I'm doing. And essentially, all I'm gonna be doing is crossing my legs over, and from here, instead of getting into this side plank position where I'm up like this and I'm trying to maintain a nice straight line, what I'm going to do is stagger my legs. They don't have to be really far, so basically, I know my leg just went out of camera there, but they don't have to be staggered like that. Basically, just enough so that even your toe touches your heel, and all that's gonna do is allow you to take your hip, drive it forward instead of trying to prop it up. So instead of doing this to get up, what you're gonna be doing is just bringing your hip up, and that's gonna allow you to rise up. So just pushing your hip through is gonna get you into this position. Now from here, just maintain a nice straight alignment from your neck all the way down through your body, and keep applying a downward pressure with your elbow. So instead of just relaxing and letting yourself just kind of collapse, you basically want to press down as much as you possibly can. I know that I kept looking off because I was trying to make sure I had a straight line so that you guys don't see kind of a crooked thing and hear me saying, oh yeah, I'm straight, when I'm actually very crooked. So sorry about the look off to the side. So now let's go and talk about the other types and ways to do it. So there are 4 different ways to make a plank, or side plank that is, more difficult and more challenging, and basically I've categorized them into these 4 different groups. I'm gonna show you them right now. You guys can't see it because of the exposure from the sun outside, so I'm gonna bring this camera on close in. Actually, I'm gonna try to get into that shot too. So the first one here is unstable surface. Second one, statically prevent rotation. 3, move with that resistance to prevent rotation. And 4, transition in and out of that side plank. So basically that exercise can be made quite challenging using a couple of different things here. And I'm gonna run through all 4 of these so that you guys have an idea of what that is and actually are able to implement them. And I'm gonna show you guys some variations too, so that you can actually kind of mess with them and kind of explore and challenge yourself and see what kind of stuff you can come up with. But as long as you're kind of falling into one of these 4 categories, chances are, and also respecting the laws of physics, you can probably find something that's very easy and that's very complex at the same time, and you can basically just kind of mix and mash that stuff and take something from, like, let's say an unstable surface and go like really easy and then go really hard. Now, unfortunately, these 4 don't follow that same trend that a plank would. So plank, when I did the first one here, which is unstable surface, I said, you know what, you can use a BOSU, and then you can always jump up to, let's say, a stability ball, which is basically that green ball right there. and go from a Bosu to a stability ball and make it a lot more challenging. And the reason you can make that jump is because there's not such a huge and significant jump from the Bosu to the stability ball. There is, but it's not as dramatic as if you were doing a side plank. A side plank on a Bosu and a side plank on a stability ball are like night and day different. I can side plank on a Bosu for 2-3 minutes. I can barely hold that thing for 30 seconds before I start really feeling it and I start giving out or I lose balance completely because it's that much more challenging. So these kind of don't all go in order. A lot of it comes down to the resistance and the style and the approach that you're taking to it. I will say though that there is a very there is a very close relationship between this difficulty and this difficulty. This one here, the transition is almost as difficult as the unstable surface if you're using a stability ball, and I'll explain why when we get to that one, so let's go check that out right now. Now, the first way to make that side plank more difficult is by using an unstable surface, as I mentioned before, which for today will be the Bosu. Now, like I said before, if you are gonna use the stability ball, which is right up there, it's going to be drastically more difficult. So you wanna start with this and then get a lot better at this before you even try that. So let me show you what this exercise is gonna look like. So basically, it is essentially just doing a side plank, but just bringing yourself up onto an unstable surface. So again, stagger the feet, bring yourself up into that side plank position and hold it here. What I want to do that's gonna make this a little bit more challenging is I want to try, and it's very difficult not to, but you want to try to make sure that your elbow doesn't fall in deep and you end up falling off to the side and rocking or rotating backwards. You want to try to maintain this nice position as much as possible. So you want to basically push your arm down into the Bosu so that you keep it nice and flat and you stay up in a nice, perfect alignment. The second way to make a side plank more difficult is by using a resistance that's gonna try to pull you and rotate you downwards, and you're gonna have to try to prevent against it. Now, this works in both ways, trying to pull you forward and trying to pull you backwards, and I'll show you what that looks like. And essentially, all we're gonna use is this elastic. You can't kind of see it. It's right, how do I get this? It's right there, right here. So it's this elastic, whatever, I'm just gonna grab it. Okay, so basically, grab this elastic, and what we're gonna do, I'm gonna have to show you from this angle here. So I'm gonna try to show you from like this, should be a good angle. So essentially, the elastics are gonna try to pull me forward. I'm gonna try to resist against it. So I'm gonna get back, and the further I get away from this, the more tension is gonna be on it. If you're holding a cable, or if you're using a cable, this doesn't really matter because if you go further, it's not really gonna change resistance. But when you're with an elastic, further you go, more resistance, yada, yada, yada. So I'm basically gonna get myself into that plank position, stagger the legs, pull up from here, hold the shoulder back and hold it here. And what this is gonna try to do is pull me forward. I've got to wrap and pull against it. Now I can do the same thing on the other side, and I can basically just try to press it out and stop it from pulling me into kind of a backwards position, rolling on my back, and I'm gonna have to prevent it. I'm gonna have to resist against it. Now, this exercise can be made a little bit more challenging by either going back or actually trying to bring my arm up, which is going to create a longer moment arm. There's a little bit of physics in there for you, but it's gonna create a longer moment arm and it's gonna pull me down harder, and I need to resist against that. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So from here, instead of just holding it here, I'm gonna pull up and hold it up into this position, and that's gonna create a lot more torque and make me fall down. This is a lot more challenging than keeping it straight on, so you really wanna kind of tread lightly with this, and you may actually wanna come a little bit closer, and very, very highly recommend using an elastic that is a much lighter in tension so that you're not gonna be like just kind of pulling it and then throwing your shoulder out. We wanna make sure that when we are creating these movements that we're trying to use to make the side plank more difficult, we are still keeping a sound technique, because that is the ultimate goal. Making sure that our bodies are moving better, not moving worse. So the way to make sure you're moving better is by making sure that your technique is always on point. So this brings me to number 3. Number 3 is essentially just a build on number 2, which is moving with resistance. So if I am in this position, instead of just holding it here or holding it up here, essentially I'm just trying to create that movement by bringing my arm up and down like that. Now the same thing can be done on the opposite side, where basically I'm just trying to push it away, or I'm just trying to close it and it's trying to pull me back. I can also go into a side row here, so instead of trying to open up, I can basically just take it here and pull it back, and this would be a substantial difference. This would be substantially easier than trying to bring my arm straight up. Now, what's interesting about this exercise is that we can actually combine a couple of those different ways to make that side plank more difficult. So what I mean by that is, instead of just basically using an unstable surface and then making a jump to moving my arms, I can actually make it a little bit more challenging by just taking this exercise here, basically an unstable surface, and then getting on a Bosu, so basically pulling this, sliding it right underneath me as I get up into the side plank position, holding it here, and that's gonna be just enough to kind of create some instability, but me having to hold back against it, and that way I'm actually combining two of those different ways of doing it. So I'm basically taking a static prevention of rotation and an unstable surface, putting them together and getting a different exercise. Now for number 4, what you're gonna wanna do, I don't need this and I don't need this. So basically what we're gonna be doing is transitioning from a plank to a side plank. Now, when I first discussed these two exercises, I wanna make sure that the exposure doesn't, yeah, we're good. When we first discussed both of these exercises, what we did talk about was basically, how to make these exercises more difficult by taking a very simple exercise and adding a little bit to them. But instead of actually adding all these little gimmicks to it, instead of adding an unstable surface or, an elastic to it, or basically a ball, anything like that, rolling out, moving our body around, what we're gonna do is we're actually just gonna move from one to the other. So, moving from that side plank to the plank and out to the side plank. So if you notice what I was doing in the first episode, you'll notice that I was actually transitioning from the side plank to the plank and out to another side plank. And essentially I was just kind of foreshadowing what I was gonna be discussing as one of the ways to make those exercises more difficult. So whether you're working on the plank or whether you're working on a side plank, this is a great way for you to transition from one and just basically roll to the other. And I'm gonna show you what that looks like, but I've gotta kind of change up this camera angle, so bear with me for one moment. Okay, so now that we're ready to do this one, I just wanted to mention that I like how I'm doing transitions, basically moving from about 5 feet over there to here. And I'm in a room that's probably about, 1.5 times the size of my bedroom. But anyway, it's really funny that I'm trying to do this. I'm just trying to basically fill in these gaps of where I'm moving from one exercise to another. So basically this side plank to side plank movement or maneuver is a lot more challenging than one might think. We think we're just, basically propping in and out, we're gonna roll, it's no problem. What the challenge is to make sure that our hip and our shoulders are traveling at the same time, and one's not leading the charge and basically taking over the movement and the others are just kind of following. We wanna make sure that we keep a nice, stable core as we're rolling from one to the other. So it's a little bit difficult for me to get this on a camera angle. You very much have to see it in person. But you can have someone watch you do it and you'll be able to see yourself roll from one to the other. So essentially get yourselves up into this staggered stance position, and I'm gonna start with a side plank, and from here all I'm gonna do is rotate my body, and as I'm rotating up on my toes. I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can probably see my toes right there, turning, and then I'm gonna come into the side plank from here. I'm just gonna continue that roll and bring myself right up into the side plank on the other side. So my feet are gonna stay staggered on one side, they roll up onto my toes, and then when I end up on the other side, they're staggered again right down there. So basically, when you are able to put all three of those movements together, you're rolling from one to the other, you're actually teaching your body how to control that very simple movement and transition through the rotation, the stability of it, the change of angles, the change in body positioning, and all that stuff, kind of keeping it all locked in together and messing around with that is gonna work wonders for your core stability. It's gonna help clean up a little bit of issues if you have some back pain, dealing with back injuries, stuff like that. This is a great exercise for that. And also, if you're just trying to really take your core game up to the next level, this is a great place to be working and basically taking these side planks and planks and make them a lot more challenging as exercise. Now try to make sure that you try all 4 of these ways to make this exercise a lot more difficult, and don't give up on that side plank. It's a great exercise. Sometimes it just needs a little bit of love and a little bit of spice, and it is a great exercise and a staple in my programs and should be a staple in your programs. Now, if you guys haven't subscribed below, hit that button. It's right, I did this again last time. I think it's right down on this side. And I will see you guys next week.